What?
Are you ready? Are you set? 'Cause it's time to embrace the Nitwits!
It's episode 20!
Yeah,
Yo,
baby!
what's up? That's wild.
Can you believe it? We made it this far?
Everyone had better be here. Do you know how hard it is to do this consistently for 20-ish weeks?
We have Emma.
Yeah, I know how hard it is.
Well, thank you,
It's
Emma.
incredible.
It's true.
Well, what are we talking about today, boys?
Well, we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons and the influences it has had on pop culture. We're going to break down story designs. We're going to break down how it's used, and we're going to break down also how you can use some of the systems and some of the standards for TV and movies and stories to embrace your own dungeon masterisms.
Masterisms, hey?
Masterisms. Yeah,
Oh,
you know it.
baby.
Oh, I've already got a masochism,
100%.
all right.
Oh my goodness.
Yep.
It was right there. I had to. Anyways.
What a guy. What a guy. We're also going to be taking some questions. I had some questions sent to me about Dungeons and Dragons, so we'll be looking into that later. But with all of this said, what has inspired us to tackle this topic, and why did we pick Dungeons and Dragons for our 20th episode? Joel, what was so influential that we needed to do Dungeons and Dragons for the 20th episode?
Dungeons & Dragons was our first episode?
Yeah!
That's
We
kind of...
started because of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. Literally us sitting
It was
around
wild.
being like, oh, we could talk about D&D for hours. Wait a minute, we could talk about D&D for hours.
And
We do
here we are.
anyways, even when we're not recording it.
It's true.
It's true. Do you know what's really hard is when you run a podcast with your buddies and you see them and you're like, I'd love to talk to you about this, and realize if I do now, we will just say all of the same things later, and it will be it just won't be genuine, you know? It's really hard. I thought this would allow us to talk more, but it doesn't. We now talk less.
I'm pretty sure we talk more now. Maybe we
I
don't
think we
talk...
talk more.
Oh, we totally talk more, but I try hard to not share all the stuff that I want to talk about.
I guess.
Yeah, all right. That's fair. That's fair.
That's fair.
We just talk about other things.
How about this? You know what? Quick review. What's your favorite two things that we've talked about so far?
Halo.
And what is maybe your favorite episode? Cameron said Halo. Nice. Joel?
Oh, man. I don't know. Why am I
We didn't
blanking
talk
over
about that.
I know, right? I don't know. I love.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I did enjoy listening to Cam talk about the Halo stuff, because that is
Yeah.
definitely his realm, and I love listening to people fan out over their own stuff. The gloves off, as out of control as they get, also pretty high up there on my list.
Yeah.
For sure. And
I think the literally last week's episode, Final Fantasy Magic.
Dude,
I thought
yeah.
that was a lot of fun. I
So
mean,
good.
don't get me wrong, it was long,
Yes.
but I think, yeah, with all three of us being excited for it and
Yes.
knowledgeable about the topic, I just feel like that was a really good conversation.
So
My favorite part of that episode was Steve phoning in to be like, "You're all idiots. You don't know how it works."
I know, I said
was
the wrong
hanging out with him
words.
last weekend because he's getting married at the end of the summer.
The Nitwits. What does he expect?
And he's like, he was literally shouting at his computer, like, "You guys have it wrong!" But he was too tired to type it into chat, so he just phoned.
So he called you.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
I love that.
Lord
It was
Potato
so
said
Oh,
Halo
yeah.
as well, and Emma said Nanner Time,
My
which came
guy.
from our very first Gloves Off episode.
I loved that very first Gloves Off episode. Let us know if you want to see more of those things. Let us know what you want us to talk about. But let's get into this topic.
Bring it.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Dragons and Dungeons.
D&D. The rest of that intro, if you want to see it, you should go find 8-Bit D&D on YouTube. Great video, absolutely hilarious. It makes me laugh so hard. You should check it out. But Dungeons and Dragons started in the 80s and stuff, and really held on to the idea of being able to tell a story with a group of friends, bringing your friends together to go through an epic story, an epic battle, and essentially put yourself into your own version of Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or Game of Thrones and some of those big, huge, epic fantasy genre pieces. But it is really become a big thing in pop culture lately, like the fact that it's actually cool to play D&D now. And one of those big things came from not only like the development of 5e and the gameplay, but also just how it became way more prevalent in pop culture. We saw it in Community, which is a hilarious episode that you will not find anymore.
Can't find it anymore.
Like,
Well, I think it's back. I'm pretty
Is it
sure it's
back?
back.
I'm gonna have
Did
to
they
look
bring
for it.
back the Dark Elf?
Yeah, if you guys don't know what we're talking about, there's an episode of Community where one of the characters is fully painted black because
Professor
he's playing a dark elf in D&D, and they were dressed up as their characters. And it got taken down for a few years at least. It might still be down. I thought it was back up, but you know.
He was the only one dressed up as his character actually in that episode. He was like the only one who came to ball.
He was
The
ready
second
for it.
episode has everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
It happened
Well,
twice. I found a bootlegged version of it. It was
I
great.
love it.
nice.
Yeah. We also saw it in Stranger Things. Stranger Things has a huge impact on Dungeons and Dragons, coming into the idea that like how it impacts the story, and it really is a campaign. You look at the boys who start at level 1 and they make their way through, and it mirrors their campaign. Like if you see, I don't know how many of you guys have seen the latest season. I don't want to. I suggest you watch it. I think it is brilliant. I really like the way that the pacing steps in. But the very first episode has a couple of them skip out to go play D&D, and the rest of them go to a basketball tournament, and they play D&D with Eddie Munson, who he's the guy who does the Metallica solo to distract Vecna. It's super metal, just great, an inspiration to all of us. But in that D&D campaign where they fight Vecna, just like in the very first season, everything that happens in that montage of the campaign happens in the series, roughly when it does. Like, you look at when Vecna starts taking his victims and when players are dying, it is the exact same layout as when people start dying in the show. When they find a power-up or when they get a high roll, it literally lines up with the episodes. It is such a brilliant way to do it, so that if you're going to pay attention to their mini campaign, it pulls its way through in the story. But that's where we wanted to talk a little bit about how that show is set up in a way that mirrors D&D. Starting off with, I think, the biggest part, which is the party joins up. We all have just these wonderful moments of the party joining up, and what that looks like. It's that famous line. Joel, what's that famous line?
You all meet in a tavern.
Yeah, right there. I don't know how many of you guys have played D&D, but that is like the stereotypical hilarious moment. You all meet in a tavern, and it's dark, and the mist pulls its way underneath the door frame as slowly your patron walks to you with 4 goblin ales. Ooh! A scary man sits in the corner, stroking his beard, or a cat that's across his face. We don't know which one, but he's suspicious. Yeah, all those classic D&D tropes, you know, cat mustache. It'll be a thing, I promise you. One day I will put it in a campaign, and you will all like it.
Do it. I dare you.
I will. But that's what you get from the very beginning, and they instantly pull it in with their creatures as well. They take their creatures from D&D. Now, not all of the creatures you see in the show reflect the creatures that you see in D&D, but Cameron, what are some of the creatures that they go over in D&D that are connected to the show?
Well, everyone knows the Demogorgon, obviously.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, that one is obviously the main villain. It seems of the series until you watch the second season. And then they have Vecna as well, who's from D&D, and
Mind flayers.
The
I'm
Mind
blank.
Flayer.
There you go. That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, they got the Mind Flayer as well. So I mean, basically, they literally every villain in the show is kind of inspired at the very least by something D&D and named by something D&D.
And they go as far as to really mimic in some ways what that is, because they also have the what do they call it? The Underdark. The Upside Down.
Yeah, the Upside
Oh, yeah.
Down.
Yeah.
Which would be akin to the
Yeah.
Shadowfell in D&D. And
Yeah.
then you have, of course, Hawkins, which is in the Upside Down, or the Shadowfell, would be a shadow plane, a concentrated place of evil that is overrun and managed and fuels power into the villain who occupies that, much to the Curse of Strahd aspect, where Strahd has a
nice place to live.
With Vecna. And they do a really good job of pulling creatures and villains in, as well as circling things back to previous points in the story. If you ever need an example of how to tie things in between sessions, I would highly recommend just watching Stranger Things, from characters, from villains, from standpoints. Like, there's definitely points where I've seen that show and been like, that was an investigation check that they were totally pulling. And the cool thing is the people who did it love D&D. Also, the other big thing is the scaling up of epicness. I think one thing that we see in the storytelling of Dungeons and Dragons is we all want to go epic. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all want to go way up, which is actually a huge thing when we talk a little bit about the D&D movie. There's a huge point in there that really gave it props for me. But what you see and what you notice is that it starts isolated and gets bigger. It's still all in Hawkins. They move around, and like you get up into the Russian wilderness, and they go down to California, and it starts to spread out and starts to move. But the whole thing starts out isolated.
Mm-hmm.
It's 4 boys in a basement, and things start to unwind. The Demigorgon, who in D&D is a prince of the 9 hells, one of the greatest of the villains, like one of the greatest bad guys in D&D, one of the most powerful by far. And so to have that, the Demigorgon slowly lose its positioning in the ranks, because it's definitely way more terrifying. I would argue a Demigorgon is harder to fight than Vecna, because you have hordes and hordes of demons and all of that. But you just watch as it grows from that outwards. So it's the 4, and then it slowly enwraps, and then the party becomes 6, and then the party moves and wraps, and then it becomes 8, and then people start to strand off, and then it's a whole city, and then it's a whole network. Like in that third season, where it's the whole thing under the mall, and it's slowly bringing in people from the town, and they're eating fertilizer and turning into like this sludge, and the rats are coming around. Like, that is an excellent way to slowly make the world bigger. And if you're going to write D&D, if you're going to play Dungeons and Dragons, you have to understand that you have to start small and slowly unwrap the present. Like, that's the fun of it. And one of those ways to do that is to really have a zone of which people are going to be staying in, like your region. This is something that's done very well in the Lost Mines of Phandelver, which Joel has run. Joel, what are some of the things that you really saw about that region as you like developed it? Because it really just unfolds well.
I didn't really get that far, admittedly. But it's fun because, like, you do start in this tiny little town. We really didn't. We did not. Emma, how far did we get? We didn't get very far. You start in this tiny little town. It's fairly calm for the most part. And legitimately, the start of it is just... basically, there's a job board, and you can go help this farmer do stuff. There's something happening at the windmill. There's something happening at some ruins. But it's all within, like, basically a chunk of this map. but the more they go out and explore, the more they learn, and then eventually it leads them down to this, like you said, the lost mines, where there's dwarves that have been digging away for years trying to get back into what is originally basically one of the original sources of magic for the area. And it's just fun to see, like, you take this tiny little town that's, a couple dozen buildings, and the more they go out, the more they explore, they start to see kind of the influence this one area has on everything surrounding it. Like, the mountain is hollowed out because of the magic well that was down there. There's creatures returning to the area because they're disturbing basically the cave in, so there's like a chimera that comes back into the area. There's other things that, like, this tiny little town suddenly becomes a bigger problem. And then if you do the newer expansion to that, which now I'm forgetting what it is, turns out there's like a mind flayer colony underneath everything.
The Shattered Obelisk and stuff brings that in,
and it just becomes a bigger thing. But yeah,
and when you're writing D&D, when you're writing stories and when you're watching stories, you have to know what is the cap and what are the restrictions of the story you're wanting to tell. Because we all want to go big, we all want to play level 12, we all want to go to level 20 one day. But there's a reason that D&D campaigns, when they're released, I call them the bracket. There's a bracket to it. Some go from level 4 or from level 1 to level 4. And then there's a next part that goes from 5 to 8. And you move through, this happened, and then you play this for this to happen. But we don't need to get carried away with advancing players through those levels super fast just for the fact to get to the cool things. Now, it doesn't mean that you should take forever to unwind your story. I am guilty of that, 100%. I love to slowly get lost in it, and I actually will have to sit down, and I'm sure that other people have to do this too, where you have to make a ruling and be like, I will not add any more to this campaign. I will not write any more for this campaign. I refuse. The campaign I'm running right now for Cameron and some of my friends and my wife, I have that rule on. I am not allowed to add any more to it. As great as it would be to continue to play this campaign for another 2, 3, 4 years, you don't want people to lose interest. So as long as you're building it up, Cameron doesn't believe me, but that's okay.
My problem is the players, not even my rating.
That is the greatest beast in all of Dungeons and Dragons is scheduling.
It's not even scheduling sometimes. Sometimes it's like...
Did I tell you guys that, so here in where I live, which is not where you guys live right now, we started a campaign with 2 of my coworkers and 2 guys they knew. We did 2 sessions before it was over. We were like 6 weeks without doing a session, and then now I'm moving, and I was like, guys, I'm out. Sorry, I'm not going to drive an hour here to play every 2 weeks. And then Jared, our DM, was like, yeah, I'm going to be honest, the fire in my heart for D&D has died out pretty quick, but I'll let you guys know when it comes back. So, yeah, that
is he plays in my campaign.
Well, it's different to be a player, though. Like his
I have him.
Excitement to DM is different because we all know he only comes and plays with us because he wants to hang out with us, not because he wants to play D&D.
He does want to play D&D. What are you talking about?
No, it's just us, Michael. He just wants to hang out with us.
That's like the conversation I had today. I literally had somebody in my group be like, D&D finally this week?
We're treasure, Michael.
It's been 3 weeks or something like that. And I said I was only free tomorrow and Friday. And they were like, oh, I'm only on free Friday. Somebody else says, not Saturday? Not Saturday. Oh, I'm not free Friday. So unless we pull something out of our butt tonight that we can play tonight, I'm like, I can't. I'm doing the podcast tonight. Yeah. That's why I'm free tomorrow. And they're like, third week in a row.
It is funny, Michael, though, you talking about, like not continuing to just keep building on something, having an end in mind, knowing when to stop. Because I remember interviews years ago when Stranger Things came out where they said, like, we have about 5 seasons planned, and that's what we're sticking with. And so far, based on the way they're talking about it, it sounds like the 5th season, which is coming out this year, is going to be the last one. And I think that's really cool because there's so many TV shows
Yes.
where like the first 3 or 4 or 5 seasons are so good, and then they just keep on going because they make money off of it. And then by the time you're at like the 7th season, everyone's like, "This is garbage. No one wants to watch this. The story like has gotten so much worse. It doesn't mean as much anymore."
And that's
So-
where I think, yeah, D&D really lends itself because you build your story and then you stop and then you move on.
Yeah. Well, and you just start another campaign. There's like a
Exactly.
million settings.
And it can be in the same world even. Like you can build, you can sit there and go, hey, guess what? In 50 years, this is the next thing. Hey, this is the next thing. And pull it together. And actually a show that suffered from this is Supernatural. I'd never really seen Supernatural, didn't really know much about it. I know it's super popular. It's the longest running fantasy show all time.
I'm watching it.
And
like it.
my wife at that time, my girlfriend was like, no, you're a nerd. You gotta watch it. I was like, I don't know. She goes, you're into storytelling. You gotta watch it. I was like, okay. So I started watching it, and you know what? The first 4 or 5 seasons of that show are done really well. What the frick?
Just keep going. Just keep going.
Okay.
I don't know what he's doing.
The first 5 seasons, he's gonna go pee his pants. That's what he's doing. He's just laying on the floor, soiling himself. If you, yeah, see, he's trying to go
see what's
soil
happening.
himself.
Cam has just slid out of his chair and is now crawling across his bedroom floor. Anyways, carry on.
Watch as he comes in with a new change of clothes. One of the things you get from that show is that they do a really good job of reoccurring characters that come in and out. Otherwise, NPCs. So if you're gonna start writing a campaign, look into how you can do it so that you have those reoccurring characters. But the other thing is how they make each episode instinctually exciting. The first season, there's an overarching story and they sort of pull through, but like the first 5 episodes are really a monster of the week scenario. Joel, do you want to talk a little bit about what a monster of the week scenario is for us? Do you know what a monster of the week scenario is?
Like Supernatural specifically, or just like
in general, like D&D wise?
I'm blanking. You just
okay. That's fine.
Going,
yeah, I got worried if I was talking too much.
No, I just got like
monster of the week. Yeah, for sure. Cameron's sitting there screwing around, peeing himself. One of the things with a monster of the week scenario is that every week there's actually literally a campaign-esque thing written about it where you play modern day, and every session there's a new monster, and so you show up at the area, you know that it's around, you have to deal with it, and then you go check it out. Very much Buffy the Vampire Slayer-esque, where every episode there's a new monster, they got to figure it out, they got to learn it, they got to track it down, and then they got to kill it. And so that's a lot of how that scenario works, and that's really good for moving things forward and making your players feel like they've achieved things. Because the biggest problem is with a huge long story or a longer-isk story is it becomes really hard to feel like your party is achieving things. The reason that the example I should say that I have for this is imagine if you as a D&D party played a campaign as Sam and Frodo for the Lord of the Rings.
A lot of walking.
A lot of walking. It's integral and it's important. And you know what? There's a lot of things that happen here, and then there's not as much that happens here, and then there's a lot that happens at the very end. In fact, it's the pivotal moment. The whole Lord of the Rings doesn't happen unless it starts with Sam and Frodo and ends with Sam and Frodo.
I'd still get bored.
They achieved the goal. They are the heroes, but their journey is more a hardship of the mind, a hardship of the soul, perseverance, greed, self-control, all these finite things that in a D&D campaign would be quite boring. I'm running a campaign, or I ran a campaign with these two right here, and the whole thing is that they're slowly trying to figure out what the heck's going on. There's these ancient powers that are filling in. There's this eldritch leech from the Shadowfell that's slowly breaching through the fabrics of reality, and there's a lot of moving from town to town, but in those places you got to have something that makes them feel like they accomplished. And one of those things that it was actually inspired by Supernatural was I'm about to give some PTSD here. The Hellcat. We had a session where most of them couldn't make it, so there's like 4 of them out of 7, and it's Halloween, and I'm just like, well, I got to rewrite something here. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I was struggling to get the story across because there was so much excitement with running a big group, and they were excited to all be playing together, and we were playing regularly, and I felt like in myself that my story wasn't excelling. Don't feel that way, DMs. You can't have a story unless people play with you. So be aware that you need to stretch and flex as the party goes. Don't let them just murder hobo everything, but you got to move. So I finally sat there and was like, you know what? I'm going to give it's Halloween week. We're gonna make it a little more grim. We're gonna make it a little more dark. So there's something happening. There's this mystery, and I tied it into the rest of the story. But all of a sudden, they have to find this thing. They track it down. They have to fight it, and a couple of them die. And it's this whole big. That became a monumental moment that shaped the rest of the campaign.
I got absolutely curb stomped.
2 of them died. One of them made it out. They were trying to figure things out. They're trying to sort it out. And then after that week, I was like, crap, I think I overdid it. And I was messaging them all separately, and they're like, that was one of the more fun sessions that we had.
That was like so good.
Okay, we reshaped the whole campaign over that, and so be aware that you need to change that. And that's some of the things that, like, if you're a dungeon master, I would suggest watching Supernatural, especially the first 4 seasons, because the first season there's an overarching story, but they're just trying to crank out episodes, and after that the storyline starts to weave in and out, and so the monsters that they encounter, the scenes that they encounter, the places that they go tie into their final goal. So they're slowly moving to get to a certain spot, but as they weave through, they interact with all of these things that sort of impact the final story, because it gives them knowledge, it gives them items, it gives them all these things that they use to fight the bad guy. But it doesn't necessarily seem all linked until they get to the halfway point, and they're like, oh my goodness, this is because of this. We need to do that now. They also do a great job in that first little bit of setting up villains. So they have a villain for the 2nd season, and then the 3rd season, and then the 4th and the 5th season, it's the same villain, much to Stranger Things. Stranger Things has the Demigorgon, and they slowly adapt their powers, and they fight it off, and they get there. And then the 2nd season, it's the Mind Flayer, and the Mind Flayer is the villain for the 2nd and the 3rd season, and then the 4th season, it's Vecna, and it turns out that he was the guy planning it and manipulating it and puppet mastering it all along. He is master of puppets that's pulling the strings. Metallica. He's that guy. And that's how you draw things in, and that's how you sort of figure out how things work, as well as knowing the villain that you're trying to play or what your end goal. Sometimes they're just trying to find a historic location. Sometimes they're trying to rescue somebody. But you need to figure out how their characters move in and out, and that's how Stranger Things and Supernatural do a really good job. What was that, Joel?
Can I sidetrack you on the same
lines
100%. of D&D's influence on like TV shows, movies, that sort of thing?
Yeah.
Where
Adventure Time.
I mean, yes. But where do you think
straight up
the switch started? Because when I grew up, when I was a kid, when I was 20 years ago now, I grew up, and maybe part of it was the household, part of it was the fact that the East Coast is very conservative. I grew up in a household that we didn't necessarily talk about it, but I had this thought that what was known as the quote-unquote satanic panic that came out of D&D.
Yes.
And so I grew up with this thought of like, oh, D&D is terrible, I'm never going to play it, blah, blah, blah. And then I did, and I realized it's not.
It's only as satanic as you make it.
Exactly,
it turns out.
And it's not like it's not this super evil thing that everybody thought it was. No. And so it's like, where do you think the switch really start to happen? Do you think it start with like 5e start back in the 2010s, 2014, whatever that was? Do you think it was before that? Do you think it's now because of Stranger Things and stuff like that, or where do you think that change really started?
I would say that there's a couple sections, if you want to look at the history of the fandom that really impact this. One of the things is that in the 80s, during the Satanic Panic, there's a key event that happens where there's this guy. He comes from a good home, real guy. It didn't have a great relationship with his mom and his parents, and he snuck out and he got high on some drugs and he went wandering around in the underground passages of the university. He gets stuck and he dies. He dies of starvation, and they find his body. And the mom, his parents didn't want to take responsibility for this, and so what happens is that she goes and she talks to somebody in the community, and they go, "Oh, I saw him hanging out with this guy, and these guys play D&D, and it's about going into dungeons and stuff." And so then the media takes this story and goes, "This guy was trying to explore the underground of this school, like it's Dungeons and Dragons, and he died because of it. He was summoning demons," and none of that happened.
No.
It's a tragic story, and I do not want to make light. I do not want to poke fun at the story, because that nothing about that is humorous. But I do have to sort of facepalm when you look at how the media takes it and spins it, and it's in Texas, it's in that more conservative area. There's a cool off period that happens. The other thing is you look at movies that are coming out. If you wanted to slowly break it down, and I've even thought about doing a video of this for like our YouTube channels, talking about different eras of movies. You want to talk about sci-fi movies? That's Star Trek and Star Wars in the late 70s, early 80s. That is something that pulls out and goes off. And then you have E.T., and then you have The Thing, and then you have Alien, and then you have Terminator. And it's these sci-fi movies come to the forefront, and it's far enough away that it still builds excitement, and it pulls from fantasy, because of course it does, but you do not have as many fantasy movies. And then you go into period pieces in the 90s, but there's a key moment that really shifts how this all works. And I do think that in 2001 there's a movie that comes out. What's so freaking funny, you two?
Just carry on.
Okay. Y'all are nuts. There's this moment that happens in 2001, and it is The Fellowship of the Ring comes out, and it is awesome. The CGI is incredible. The cinematography is outstanding, and it is by far and away the best movie of the year. And The Two Towers comes out, and it's just as good. And then Return of the King comes out, and it is just as impressive. It wins Best Picture. The Lord of the Rings really sets that up as you can have this huge, massive adventure with magic, and it is cool. What happens next? What are the other movies you get in the 2000s? Well, you get the Harry Potter franchise. Magic is cool. Pirates of the Caribbean, guys, is Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
There's a magical artifact, it gets brought in, people weave in and out, and then slowly the story compacts and finishes with the third one. The other ones are okay, the fourth one's okay, but it's a standalone. But you look at that first three movies of Pirates of the Caribbean, magic and folklore have this huge build in it, and that's where I think you get a lot of inspiration for like Stranger Things. Where Stranger Things sort of takes that world of adventure and magic and mixes it with The Goonies, with Stand By Me, with these classic coming-of-age stories, and it weaves it in because we've now grown up to the point where the filmmakers, who are in their 20s and 30s and 40s, were the kids of the 80s who were getting pressured to not play D&D. It's this breathing, it's this breath of fresh air where people can sort of sit down and go, what are we actually worried about? And that's where it's becoming cool again. It's because of fantasy. It's because of Lord of the Rings. And that's what gave room for Stranger Things to come in, which ultimately gave it a huge breath of fresh air and got more people in. 5e being more player friendly. This new edition also being more player friendly. I started playing in 3.5e with my cousin. So fun. 5e. So much fun and so much excitement, and it builds into that sense of epicness and awesomeness. And then you get the Marvel movies, which are really all fantasy movies, very similar, and there's a lot of things to take from them when you look at building a D&D campaign. But that's where I would sort of sit down and say that it really, really leveled itself, if that makes sense.
No, that's very fair. I just like that was something I always big thought of. Like we start talking about this before the podcast. I was like, man, where was that shift? Because like I had that, and again, it was might have been just the household and the area that I grew up in. It was like I remember that even as a kid, even like into my early teenage years, and even by the time I graduated high school in 2012, it was still very much like, oh, this is such a terrible thing. This is so evil. Blah 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 blah. I'm like, but is it? And no.
Yeah.
Well,
And now
even,
it's everywhere.
like we all know people whose parents still have that thought about D&D, right? And
yeah.
and then it's funny because we go and we're like, hey, we know like a lot of prominent people in our community who all happen to play Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Like you go to them and it's like, I'm sorry, do you think that person's satanic? Do you think that person's worshiping? And it's like, no, obviously not. You know these people. You know they're legit people. They're just having fun in a game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even that still people will be like, well, no, but it's still like there's this fear that is so ingrained from that idea in the 80s.
Well, and
as a Christian, like that's something that I constantly see come up, especially with like talking with parents and youth, is like there is room for things to get really scary, really dark. I have played some D&D games with some people where I'm like, I'm not going to do this again because it was just too much. Like we crossed some lines, and I do not shy away from scary, spooky things in D&D. These guys can attest to it. Liches, demons, nine hells. That's a lot in my campaigns. But you get a lot of these people who are really scared of what's the worst thing that could happen, when really it's who is DMing for them, and what's the type of story you want to run, because there's all sorts of things. You got your grim fantasy, like The Witcher is another one that really influenced D&D again because of that story-esque build of constantly fighting different monsters and creatures, and you get into that. Though it really made people excited to have dragon shift into humans, which got annoying because I had one of those things queued up, and then everybody's like, well, you're just going to rip off The Witcher. I'm like, no! There's things in my campaign right now that I'm like, I have these things written, and I sent them off to people, and they're like, that's a cool idea. And then Baldur's Gate 3 came out, and they're like, you're ripping off Baldur's Gate 3. I was like, no, before it was even in the beta, I had it written down 5 years ago. Shut up.
You look at things like the Elder Scrolls series, even the Fallout series, those kinds of things. They all came out after D&D, and were clearly inspired to some degree by it.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of those role-playing games incorporate things like stats. They incorporate traits. You level up and you gain more abilities. Like, they all incorporate what D&D started.
Well, World of Warcraft is heavily inspired by D&D when it went from Warcraft, which is the turn-based strategy game, to the MMO RPG. That's a huge inspiration from D&D, where you're playing through that. And another thing that they did very well is continuing to up the stakes and move things around, so there's a general narrative that you move through, but everything else sort of takes its time to step through, and it's really cool in that.
You know what else was inspired by Dungeons and Dragons?
What?
Baldur's Gate 3.
Yes, which is a huge thing, as well as Critical Role. Like, you have to look at all of a sudden, there's these huge campaigns that are just fun to listen to. I have friends who don't play D&D, don't play Magic the Gathering. To them, for those of you guys who don't know, huge sports guy. I play on sports teams. I talk lots of sports. And in those communities, I'm viewed as a bit of a unicorn and a weirdo, because then I can take all of that information I have about that and pull it into Lord of the Rings, Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering, all of these like video games, stories, really nerdy things. And they listen to Critical Role on Spotify because it's entertaining and it's funny and the stories are compelling. And the other problem with that, though, is then everybody thought that their DM needed to be Matt Mercer, and that's not how that works. Don't do that to me. Just because I've been accused of looking like Matt Mercer doesn't mean that I can do things like Matt Mercer.
There is something to be said for... I'm so sorry, Joel.
Oh, no, keep going.
There's something to be said for Matt Mercer and some of his friends using the systems created by D&D to create a highly successful show that's entertaining to people who don't even care one bit about D&D or board games or tabletop games or anything.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's functioned as a medium for them to create some amazing content. And now you have other creators like Dimension 20 from Dropout, and like there's podcasts where people just are playing D&D and recording it, and people listen to that like crazy. Yep. Like it's wild because it's almost like an interactive book more so. Like you can like listen to the story and there's a story, but then you get to like hear the people like make their actions, make their thought process.
So choose your own adventure audiobook.
Yeah.
Yeah, people eat that up apparently.
Yes.
Joel, you had a thing to say?
Oh no, I was just I was just gonna say that when I restarted this campaign, and even after some things happened in the campaign, I reiterate to everybody at my table, I'm like, I will not be Matt Mercer. I will never be Matt Mercer. I won't even be Michael, because I have people who have played with Michael at my table. I'm like, I will never even be Michael. And you either have two options. You're okay with that, or you suck it up. And they're like, nope, we absolutely understand. We know you're not going to be Matt Mercer. Just, they're like, do whatever you can, blah, blah. And half the time, I sit back and I do absolutely nothing because they do it all for me.
Heck yeah,
Thanks
baby.
for that comment, Joel. I appreciate it.
True, though.
One of the questions I see here is, what, in your opinion, makes a compelling story?
I definitely thought you were about to ask Gizzy's question about your opinion on.
Shush! Don't even.
We're not going there. This is not a sports podcast.
I haven't been on the internet almost all day. Shush! A compelling story. I won't even entertain this garbage.
Are we talking about like stories as in books, stories in shows, stories in D&D, or all of the above?
I think you can mix it into all the above, and the biggest thing I'm about to say to start off is, guys, it's your opinion. There's different things that get your gears rolling in your head that compel you to come alongside the characters and become invested. For me, I love a story where things slowly unravel to the point where either characters realize that they can't take care of it themselves, so they have to go get help in other places, or characters use things that they struggle with to overcome their problems. I love a character-driven story. One of my a great long adventure is great, but it's only as good as the characters that you've put into it. A movie that I really like that does a really good job of this is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? It is inspired and is a loose retelling of the Odyssey, which is something else that has influenced D&D beyond all things. This huge epic poem written. It's fantastic. I really encourage you guys to all check it out. But Oh Brother, Where Art Thou has 3 compelling characters that make their way through, and they bond together through separation, through lies, through deceit, and all these things, but still realize that they can only do this if they all work together. And in the end, they don't get what they want, but they're okay with what they got. And that is an interesting way to tell a story. Another story that I really enjoy of how things unfold is in, well, the movie that comes to mind right now of a ragtag group of people who are thrown together and have to overcome a villain of some sort would be like, obviously Lord of the Rings is up there, but I would even go like to you look at the stages of story in Indiana Jones. Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think, is my favorite movie. Like, in terms of I could just watch it at any point in time. I don't think it's the best made movie of all time, but it is amazing. And just you look at how those characters move in and out to complete a goal and what that goal is. And the villains are slowly revealed as the story pulls off, and they interact, they get it done, and they move away. And if you want to look at a really good way to pace out a story, every 10 minutes in that movie, there's a new thing happening that moves forward. It's not necessarily fast and high paced, but there's a new section. Every 10 minutes, you can sit with a clicker or a notepad and go, oh, this happens. And then 10 minutes, this happens. And then 10 minutes, this happens. And you slowly see how it advances in 3 distinct settings. You have the Mayan temple at the beginning. which, guess what, doesn't even have anything to do with the narrative story. It just establishes who the characters are. There's the first 20 minutes of that movie just establish who Indiana Jones is. It has nothing to do with the end story. It establishes two characters, a villain and Indiana Jones. So if you want to look into that, how you use that to establish your party, you look at how it steps in to what establishes your party, what's the main event, what brings some people in, and then building off from there. So that's what I find compelling. And again, knowing your limits.
Mm-hmm.
What is the limit of your story? And I've said it already, but that's what is making Stranger Things exciting. That's what makes the Dungeons and Dragons movie exciting. It was not a world-ending threat. They traveled through multiple planes to save Neverwinter. That is the threat. They start out maybe level 2 or 3, and they escape, and they don't even want to do it. It's not even their goal to do it. He just wants to get his daughter back. But in order to get his daughter back, he has to do this adventure. Holga wants to have a family. She's not even set out to save. She just wants to have a family. But in that happens. The druid, I can't remember her character's name. She wants to save the forest. She wants to save her people, her aunt, her conclave. And the way that happens is that, oh, well, they have to band together to save this to get this. Their character goals and their reasons for what they're doing are impacted by the overarching story of the Red Wizards of Turn and all of those things. It's not Turn. I don't know why. Thay. Yeah, there you go. The Red Wizards of Thay. But it is not that overarching theme of fighting the wizards that is their character's goal. Their character goals are these other things, and to get these things, they must do this. And that's what I think more people need to include when they make and write their own campaigns. Your huge overarching story plot line is divided into little sections, like section 1, section 2, section 3. I like a 3-act story, thinks it wraps up nicely. You look at trilogies, like that's how it goes. Beginning, establishment, and feeling confident. Section 2, the fall, the major conflict, and having to figure out where we go now, and then the redemption and the end mark. If you want a really good option of this, guys, watch the Dark Knight trilogy.
True. It's true.
Watch the original Star Wars trilogy. The heroes win, the heroes succeed, it looks like they got it figured. They've stepped into this new wide world, and they have goals completed, and they are feeling strong. Section 2, the villain steps up, the villain steps in, and the heroes fail. Your party cannot be superheroes. They have to fail. There's a reason why when Loki gets on the helicarrier in the first Avengers movie, things go sour and he escapes and it starts to unfold because there has to be a reason for them to pick their stuff up, put it back in their bags, and head out to finish the fight. And if you can make a plot line that works like that and allows your characters to write their characters in a way that threads through, so when you're making your story, leave room so that when your players present their characters, you can slowly have them gain those abilities. I'm not necessarily the greatest at that. I'm still working on it. But in the campaign I played with Cameron and Joel, one of the things that we did is when they wrote out their characters' intentions, like I made them write out what is the character's biggest fear, what's their intentions, and what is like the farthest that they will go for those intentions. Because that not only keeps me on the same page, but it keeps them on the same page. And then I can like message them and be like, is this what, are you still on this, or do we need to change this? And it helps keep things. But then at the end of it, they defeat the big bad guy. It wasn't even what they had set out. They went out to try to figure out why this necromancer rider-like thing was terrorizing the region. It turns out that it was something bigger than that, and then it stepped out more after our hospital fight. Maybe we'll cover that in favorite sessions and stuff. But what then takes place is then as they get to the end of it, their characters' goals are fulfilled, and some of the characters that died along the way are also fulfilled and brought back and shown in that. And so by doing that, not only do you help your players feel like they succeeded in their personal story, but they succeeded in the big story, if that makes sense, for like a compelling storyline.
See, one of my biggest things is I love a story that does not take itself too seriously. One of my favorite books. I hadn't even heard about it. Didn't even know who the author was. Didn't know nothing. I was sitting in Books and Company in town. Um, Saw this book, picked it up, flipped open to a random page, read the first line on that page, and was immediately sold on it. That book is called Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. The first line I read was one of the characters saying, "Well, I'll be a troll's left testicle." That was the first line I read, and I immediately was like, I want to read this book. Flipped it over, started reading what it was actually about. Basically, what it was is to put it in D&D terms, a retired party comes out of retirement to save one of the party members' daughters, who's getting wrapped up in basically the big bad evil guy. And it's literally these like these 45, 50-year-old guys who haven't been on an adventure in 15 plus years, who's living at home, running an inn, or runs like a little magic shop, or whatever it happens to be. These guys coming out of retirement to go on this adventure, and the whole like first act of the book is them being like, that one line from Lethal Weapon and whatever else, "I'm too old for this crap," and like them like breaking back into that whole adventure of things. The second act is them like, yeah, we can maybe we can do this, and then something goes wrong, and then finally it ends with them having that redemption and being like, yeah, we're getting the band back together, only for them to be like, yeah, no, we're actually done with this now. But it's just like, it's such a funny book, and it has like a really serious tone because this guy is worried about his daughter. He has a broken relationship with his daughter. He wants to fix it. He wants to get her back. But all throughout, there's all these little tiny moments of the humor in it. It happens like Lord of the Rings. It's like, oh, what's that you're eating? This would be a nice bit of salted pork. It's just like all these funny little moments that get thrown into an overall serious story. But like, it doesn't take itself too seriously to the point where it's like, well, like there's no levity to it. There's just, it's got to be like hard all the time, basically.
And I think that's the biggest thing with pacing, is you have to figure out ways for them to, like, the characters got to get their rests in. They got to go to the market. They got to buy things and there's still things though to be learned from that. Don't make, like, I don't know how many of you guys watched The Last of Us, but in that first season, there's definitely a couple filler episodes where you're like, okay, a couple things happen, and I'm like, I personally I didn't care about that with that character. I didn't care about this, or I just wanted to see the story progress. You do not have to mistake a filler episode for a contextual episode in your writing, where you put together, maybe they go to the shop, but in going to the shop, they learn little things about the town. They learn little things about the next step. There's very small foreshadowing, and your players don't have to pick up on it. But what makes it fun is when later on they're in that moment, oh my goodness, we knew this the whole time. Oh my goodness, this is what was said. And it's like, okay, we got now we know how to take this on. And so don't have that all the time, because it gets really tiring sometimes for players to constantly feel like they have to look into every single thing that a character says. There's some characters that are just there to just fill a spot, and somehow that's always the character that people want to hold on to, and it drives me nuts. I once had 2 gnomes that were going to be influential in the final battle of a campaign. And so the people in my party were moving through the castle, and they're getting towards the end, and they find a drawer that opens up, and it's actually a wardrobe, and as the 2 doors open up, this T-Rex head comes through, and it will bite whatever is there. And it's supposed to be a hard thing to get through the room so that they can find this cool ring of invisibility, and it allows them to sneak away. Did they find the ring of invisibility? No. Did they grab the wardrobe and start pulling it through the rest of the castle? Yes. Did they then go up to every door, knock on it, and then hold the wardrobe up so that the T-Rex head would eat what was ever in the door? Yes. Did it mean that these 2 gnomes that I had spent months putting together their story and their goals and their driven energy and why they're going to help the party, got ended because they opened up the wardrobe 3 times and chomped them? Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that
That's
sounds
Jared's
right.
fault.
The same
asked
Jared
Jared
who's
about it,
DMing
Cam.
for me.
Yeah. So in that sense, you get that those things happen, and you got to be able to shake that off. That also makes for some really funny moments. Yeah. But in another thing with that though is understanding what parts of the story will entertain your players. And that's like when you look at TV series, what entertains people in with talking about Supernatural, the way that they pull back to the trauma of the 2 Winchester boys. Those 2 characters, nobody has gone through more trauma in television than those 2 characters, I'm sure of it. But just the consistent pulling back of information and slowly unveiling the curtain is really cool. It gets a little much in the end because at some point you're like, okay, these 2 are basically gods, and it does really matter. And that's where you need to know your limits. But like in Stranger Things, when they pulled back in that 4th season to all the different clocks in the 1st season and to the sections in this, all of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness, Vecna was there the whole time. Is it totally possible that through the 3rd season they're like, do you know what? We need a bigger villain. We need something. And they wrote Vecna and then they just tied him into all those things later and pulled a J.K. Rowling? Yeah, 100%. And if you're like, what do you mean by that? The Horcruxes, there's a common fan theory that it wasn't until like the 4th book that she was like, oh, maybe I should have something that they need to grab, like a couple of MacGuffins that pull in so they can fight Voldemort. And that's where like I wouldn't be surprised if the Diary of Tom Riddle was made a Horcrux after that book came out. Like it wasn't a Horcrux to begin with, but she sat there and went, oh, well, I could pick this and this and this and this and that. And that's something that maybe happened with Stranger Things. They're like, oh, by the way, this clock, oh, well, we'll zoom in this. Oh, well, the way that the Gorgon uses his hand, we're going to make that part of Vecna's mangled hand now, which aligns with D&D and the hand of Vecna. Like, that is okay. And I would actually say fully do that. Again, like I was saying with these guys, I shifted the whole campaign and rewrote a bunch of it to fit the new tone that we established in that one session. And it was far better than anything I had written for that story beforehand. And it really made me work and it made me think. And it was a lot of fun in that story. But this is the point where we're just going to look at if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, we're going to talk a little bit about how D&D can impact the future of storytelling and what we want to see out of it in different stories and different settings, and maybe even settings to explore in movie, TV. But throw in your comments.
Yeah, Rexer had another one about like what makes a compelling character. Gizzy had like some good comments about that. You know, them actually having goals and struggles. No one likes a character that can do just anything and everything with no issues. And we definitely didn't deal with any of that in any of our campaigns.
There's a term for it. It's called min-maxing. When players want to, I mathematically create a problem for the dungeon master. Often it's just they want to have a really cool character, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you want your character to be able to do everything out of the gate, there's a reason those characters aren't exciting. How many of us sit there and go, man, Rey is one of the greatest movie heroes of all time from Star Wars? Exactly. If they had made it so that she had to train and develop and slowly grab these things, we would have a character that was compelling. Every time she came up against an obstacle, she could just do it.
Yeah.
Harry Potter gets his crap kicked in. And that's something that's something that comes up naturally. Like she can just all of a sudden, her and Finn just know how to wield a lightsaber. And there's different
training
things.
Montage in the second movie.
Yes.
Even still,
and they could have. Still, though, she's all of a sudden just able to do all these extra things. She's all of a sudden the most powerful Jedi. And like, if they had established a couple things, and like you see her struggle a little bit more or need to rely on other people, that's what brings it in. Somebody who's influenced how I play D&D, my buddy Colin, and I really hope that we can bring him in for something. One of the things that he told me when you're building a character, and something that I've taken into whenever I get to be a player, is your goal as a character should be to boost and make everybody else in the party better. I'm not saying play a support like in certain video games. I'm saying that if you're a barbarian, you put yourself in a place so that somebody else can do the epic thing. So you take on the fight and you soak up all the damage and then somebody can rip a spell in there. Or if you're the wizard, your goal is to try to maneuver things. If you're always trying to make everything better and if you're trying to hand off these different cool moments to everybody else, it brings the story together in a way like Lord of the Rings. Every character in Lord of the Rings has their own defining moment that they are able to pull together for the party. And it happens because they have certain skills in certain areas, but you need to be able to hand that off. If your character is so self-centered on what they can do, you lose the excitement of playing as a party. And that's the whole point of D&D, is you are a team.
Yeah.
And it's team-oriented.
I love, in regards to, like, as you said about not having an overpower, I love the ability to fail rolls. It's so... It makes for, like, those moments of, oh, crap, we really screwed up. Or, oh, crap, this is hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, do we need to suplex Cam again? Maybe.
Yeah.
Did he swallow something he shouldn't have again? Maybe.
Oh, baby, you know it.
And that's the thing, especially with compelling characters. If you're making a backstory, try to establish why you have certain items. So, like, what is significant about your sword? That's a common one. People are often like, oh, I don't know. No. Why is it a family heirloom? Why does it matter to you? Because then, if you're fighting, and let's say you throw it to try to get an extra point of damage, your character will try to get it back. And it creates this self form of conflict in this, like, it becomes a micro story in itself, where you're like, I need to keep my sword safe. There's no magical reason behind it. It has nothing to do with saving the world. But to my character, it's important. And little things like that, as well as pulling in moments of how come your character would do this? Why would your character do that? You don't have to write some huge manuscript. And I've definitely been guilty of this, where I played for a guy and I was like, he's like, hey, yeah, write my character. Hey, do this, do that. Homebrewed world. And I sat there and I was like, here is my 14 pages double-sided. And he's like, I was like, okay. How about this? And I went through and abbreviated. I was like, here's my 5 pages double-sided. and we were able to work with that, just because there's so much that all of a sudden he has to take in. And it just explained, like, I had a reason for why my character, I was a turtle, but why I had antlers attached to my shell. I had a reason for why I had this handguard on my hand. I had a reason for why, like, the little ruins that I would carve into my shell. I made my character have these motivations, because then after a party member died, in the next long rest, my character would sit there and it would get somebody else, or it itself would use magic to carve a rune into its shell to match and represent the friend that it lost, because then it could carry around and be a warrior for these memories that fell behind him. Is that symbolism. And so you can bring these things into it that make your character exciting, because then other people want to see your character reach its end. If that makes sense.
Oh no, 100%. Like, I completely forgot that the beginning of our the campaign, even the halfway point of our campaign, you had us write out, like, the biggest fears, the goals, all that kind of stuff. I completely forgot about that. And then when we hit the end of the campaign, and you're like, yeah, he is now, like, a full lunar knight of the moon goddess. He has this and this and this. And it's like, he did his thing. Mostly.
Yep.
Yeah, we spent 40 minutes at the end of the last session just going over what each person achieved, and everybody was so excited for for everybody else's character to get what they were going after.
He is now the guardian angel in my current campaign for when the party screws up. He almost had to intervene in one of their last sessions because they almost all died.
That's so cool.
Didn't one of us just get obliterated after immediately complete? What am I trying to say?
Yes.
Yeah, so Taylor's character got completely obliterated. However, because he was consistently trying to... Taylor, he died right before we got into the final battle, so he brought in this new character for the last, like, 2 sessions before the final battle. And in that, one of the things is he was trying to impress his father, who is a deity, and he was showing that he is rightfully so... able to gain the lordship of being a demigod. And in doing this, he brought it in so that when he got totally obliterated, his father looked down and saw it, and he was put as a constellation into the stars. So though he died, and though he was totally obliterated, his final act did in fact win the favor that he was looking. So even in death, his image was put into the sky as a memory for warriors in the future to look back at his courageous act and know that sacrifice is in fact honorable.
Indeed. Indeed.
Which is really cool.
Nice.
Any last minute questions, last minute things, thoughts, comments, concerns?
Yes. Yes, what Ronan said there. As a DM, don't be afraid to kill a character. I know you're scared because, I want them to have fun. Well, I want them to... Sometimes things happen, and if you have no consequences in your game, people will do whatever they want. You have to be okay with a character dying. Yes, I have fudged roles as a DM to help the players, and only ever to help the players so that things move and weave. And I have saved people because, like, oh my goodness, they're all going to die. Yes, sometimes you do that, and that's being a DM for the players. But I have wiped players out and had no frustration. One of the things that I do to sort of get players in the mindset is I have a sword that my friend Kale made for me, and I will bring it to D&D sessions when I expect a player to die. Sometimes nobody dies, and it's a victory, and sometimes lots of players die.
It's true.
It's true that your computer's about to self-destruct?
No, sorry. It did because I ran out of space to continue recording this session, but I've got a backup plan, so it's okay.
Nice.
What? What do you mean? Well, if you're hearing this on the podcast, that means we figured out the backup.
It's fine.
Okay.
Fine. Don't worry about it.
One of the other things, I think, just like D&D wise and storytelling, is that there's a lot of opportunity to just do some anthology series. If they came out with a TV show where there was 8 episodes and a party moved through, and then that happened and it ended, and then a new season started with a totally new story with new characters, that's my opinion for what should happen with the D&D movies. We had those characters, they had their adventure. They are done. Let's see a next group of characters take it on. We don't need this huge, ever-building Marvel Cinematic Universe of D&D.
I don't even know if we're going to get a second movie, unfortunately.
Probably not, but that's okay. But yeah, that's some of the things that D&D really has to offer, and that's some of the ways that stories really influence and the philosophy of those stories that have impacted through D&D. Yes, I know, Ronan, that you fight in building tanks, and it mildly disturbs me sometimes when I have to DM for you and figure out how I can actually attack you. I have 100% designed sessions to try to make you either get really, really hurt or have to do something so that you can't use your fancy shield or something. I've done the same thing for other buddies of mine who play only life domain clerics. I'm like, I have to design a session around pulling you away so I can deal some damage to people, because otherwise people feel like they're too strong, and they're like, oh man, we're so cool and good, and they're like level 4, and they're like, oh, we're undefeatable, and then they come up against a villain who they're supposed to run away from at some point, but because they're so cocky, they get walloped. And you're like, oh no, and they're like, oh man, he just killed us because we were too strong. It's like, no, you're not that strong. You're level 4. Yeah, but
yeah. Well, I feel like this is a good place to call it, boys.
Yeah.
To end our 20th episode.
100%. There's so much more to talk about, but let's save that for a later time. If you guys want to see us talk more about D&D, let us know. If you want to see us make videos about some of the favorite characters we've had, or maybe talk through some of our favorite D&D sessions we've ever done, let us know. Check us out on YouTube. We have shorts out on all of our different platforms. And where the heck can they find us, guys?
What you just
TikTok,
you just said?
Instagram, YouTube.
I don't know all the platforms.
Those 3 specifically: Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Yeah. All of them use the exact same @. All of it is @Nerds&Nitwits, all one word.
and
100%.
AND, not ampersand, because
True.
some apps don't like the ampersand for some reason,
don't
and
know
they
why.
do weird things.
Oh, and Spotify. We're also on Spotify. I forgot about Spotify.
Yeah.
Don't forget about Spotify.
Yeah,
Check it
but
out.
we're only on episode 3 on Spotify because it's a lot of work to.
Cam's
edit
working on
things.
that, but Cam is really busy at the moment, so just have some patience.
Yeah.
He's getting there.
That's
Don't
right,
worry,
guys. Tune into
Also-
Spotify, and you can see how much we've improved in podcasting.
It's true. Or just watch them on
Right
YouTube.
now, episode 3 is the most current one there, and episodes 2, 3, and honestly 4, we were still pretty, figuring things out. And
A little rough.
it's really hard to edit when I'm sitting there listening to myself and going, man, this is boring. But the goal is to do it anyways.
100%.
The quality of it went up as well, for sure. There's
Yeah,
a lot less
100%.
phone
But,
dinging, things clacking, but
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you guys for obviously listening and interacting with us. And
yeah.
we have a lot of fun doing this. So keep interacting, keep listening.
And send us more D&D questions. We'll come back later with another episode on D&D in the future. Who knows when it'll be, but it will be.
And we're
One of them
nowhere near
days-
done yet.
Bye.
Hashtag 20th episode.
Heyo. All right.
See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.